Joining me now are three MPs who will be listening to that speech and discussing it later. Labour's Hilary Benn, for the Conservatives Tim Loughton, and for the SNP Deidre Brock. Welcome to you all. Tim Loughton, are you upset that so much of the manifesto is not going to be in the Queen's speech? Things like grammar schools and dementia tax and the rest of it.
Well, those things I'm not particularly upset aren't in it, because it obviously did us a lot of damage during the campaign itself. On something like adult social care, I mean, this has got to be dealt with, so I think we might now have a bigger, proper, grown-up consultation, which is what should have happened in the first place. This problem hasn't gone away, but it's certainly going to be a slimmed-down Queen's speech.
So I mean, from your perspective, almost it's almost a programme that you're happier with than you might have been had the Conservative benches been squeaking at the seams.
Well, I think there were things in the manifesto, as we all know, that didn't do us a lot of favours, were not properly thought through and certainly weren't consulted on. The fact that they are not going to be part of a legislative programme now is to be welcomed, because we need to do a lot more work on some of those things. There are some important things we're hoping for in the Queen's speech, things that aren't high-profile items, but to do with mental health, to do with rail ombudsman, with terrorism, all important things, but all of it's going to be overshadowed by Brexit and by commentators saying what's not in it. But that doesn't make the things that are any less important.
I mean, do you think he's right that this is going to paralyse all other politics, including Indy Ref 2 and the rest of it?
Well, I mean, the focus is certainly very much going to be on Brexit. I mean, 8 pieces of legislation, I think, isn't it? And enormous amounts of statutory instruments that we'll need to keep an eye on as well. But I'm sure the Tories are rather relieved that actually that is not possible, and that a lot of that legislation is not going to be looked at, because so much of our time in this next Parliament, for however long it lasts, is going to be taken up with looking at Brexit and scrutinising that.
Hey, Hilary Benn, do you think that within that mass of legislation to do with leaving the European Union, there's going to be room to soften it or shift what actually takes place in the direction you'd like to see it go?
I think we're certainly going to see that happen. Look, the Prime Minister didn't just lose her majority, she lost her authority. And I welcome the fact that some of the things that would otherwise have been in the Queen's speech, the return of selection at 11, fox hunting, taking away winter fuel payment, taking away free school meals for the children who get all of them in the first 3 years of primary school at the moment, all of that is gone. But I think since this is a Parliament that is going to be dominated by Brexit, one thing is absolutely crystal clear. The mantra we've heard over the last year, we might leave with no deal because no deal is better than a bad deal, is now absolutely dead and buried. And Parliament is in the end going to determine the type of Brexit that we have. It's taken a long time for the government to realise that, but the numbers in the House of Commons now mean that they're going to have to listen to what the House of Commons says about leaving the European Union, as we will be, but doing it in a way that is sensible and protects our business and our jobs and the economy, which depends on that.
I mean, is that something that the Prime Minister and other ministers speaking in the debate following the speech need to hammer home now?
Well, I think the Prime Minister clearly needs to be seen to be listening a bit more. Clearly, she did not get what she asked the British people for a couple of months ago, and needs to adapt to those new circumstances. But one thing that absolutely has not changed is the vote almost a year ago today to come out of the EU, and all that entails. And the major parties went into this election committed to coming out of the EU, which means coming out of the single market and the customs union as it stands. Those things don't change. The way in which we negotiate perhaps changes, but Parliament was always going to have the final say on this. Anyway, nothing has changed in that respect.
I mean, do you accept that argument? We know what the SNP's position was, but do you accept, as is being said by a lot of Conservatives, that actually Labour and the Conservatives were pretty much in the same place on Britain?
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure where Labour is at the moment, actually, after that 50, the letter signed by about 50 MPs to The Guardian overnight supporting staying in the single market, whereas at the same time John McDonnell, I think, made it fairly clear that he did not support staying in the single market. So I'm not quite sure where they are on that. In regard to the Tories, I mean, this whole Brexit negotiations even have started as a complete shambles, and I can't see it getting any better, frankly.
Hilary Benn, I mean, Labour is in a confused position, isn't it, on this? I mean, do you accept the claims that actually 82% voted for leaving the single market, leaving the customs union, because that's what you said in your manifesto?
No, what we said in our manifesto is we want to get the best possible access to the single market, and I think everybody agrees on that. There is a problem about free movement, and that is why I think maintaining membership of the single market as it is difficult, and I know some Labour colleagues take a different view. But look, on tariff and barrier-free trade, the government says that is its first objective. It is inexplicable why it decided to say we want to walk away from the customs union. Because if you think both about the needs of British industry, the one thing, when I was chairing the Brexit Select Committee, the one thing British business said to us was, please, we wish to maintain tariff and barrier-free trade. And the other problem is Northern Ireland, where if you don't want to see a return to a hard border with customs posts, the simplest way to do that is for the government now to change its mind, to say to the EU, actually, you know, we'd like to stay in the customs union, because that would achieve both of those objectives.
But the EU made it clear at the beginning of negotiations that membership of the customs union wasn't a possibility otherwise. We haven't spent the last year working on a Department for International Trade, doing the groundwork for major trade deals with the major trading partners around the world who don't have trade deals with the EU at the moment, with the 6.9 billion people who don't have to live within the EU, to stay within the customs union, which means we cannot do our own trade deals. That's a really important part of coming out of Brexit. I'm completely confused by the Labour position. Now, you may have made it clear in the manifesto, Hilary, but since then there seems to be completely contradictory positions between the shadow cabinet and between your own backbenchers. I think the Conservative position is now absolutely clear. Even those of my colleagues who were least enthusiastic about coming out of the EU, I think we know where we're going. I really don't know where the Labour Party position is at the moment, and they need to sort themselves out so we can get on with a unified approach that is going to take us out of Brexit in the smoothest possible way.
But Tim, would you be prepared to leave the European Union with no deal?
Well,
it's a very simple question.
I would prefer not to, but when I go and look at a house with an estate agent, I don't say I'm going to buy this house under any circumstances and therefore lay all your cards out on the table. We need to play a tough game that shows we're not going to be trampled on, and we're going to get the best possible deal for us and for the EU. It's not one-sided.
But you were trampled on right on the first day of the negotiations.
Why?
When having said
why make a big deal out of that?
There was going to be parallel negotiations on the divorce arrangement and the new relationship, the first thing that David Davis did was
do you want the negotiations to fail?
Let's bring in Deidre here, because in a sense, the more of this sort of argument that goes on between the parties and inside the parties, the better news it is for the SNP, because the bigger mess the UK makes of Brexit, the more you think that the cause of independence will be strengthened.
Well, I can't see that anyone looking down to Westminster at the moment can possibly see that the cause of dependence on the UK is strengthened by the current state of affairs. But from the SNP's point of view, we've obviously constantly advocated staying in Europe, and that was supported by the vote in Scotland. We put to the Tory government a proposal which would enable Scotland to at least stay in the single market. That was fairly comprehensively rejected. We are now trying to get representation at the negotiating table, and again, despite the fact that Nicola Sturgeon is probably the best politician in the UK at the moment, she is being kept away from that table, and she would be an absolute asset to a negotiation which, as I said before, has started as
she had a bit of an election setback as well, though.
Yeah.
A lot of
we had, but we still have the largest number of seats, and we have more seats than
do
all
we.
of the other parties put together.
On that basis, I just want to go back to first principles. Do you think this should be happening at all today? I mean, John McDonnell has suggested that this government is somehow illegitimate, and that therefore the Queen's speech for a minority government headed by Theresa May is wrong. Do you agree with that?
I think she's in a very awkward position, particularly going into the Queen's speech today without DUP backing. I really, frankly, expect that will be coming at some stage. It just needs to be before, as I understand it, next Thursday in the vote.
What do you think?
Look, it's very unstable, but the largest party has the right to make the first effort
So
to
you
form
don't
a
think
government.
she's illegitimate now?
Well, I think, as I said right at the start, Adam, I think she has lost her authority, and a lot of Conservative MPs feel the same way.
Well, look, we've got the largest number of seats, the largest number of votes, the largest since the 1980s, and we need to have a working government. Whatever you think about the current state of affairs, this country needs a government. The Conservatives, with DUP backing, are the only prospect of a...
And how long before we have a change of Tory leader?
That's not on the table in the immediate future as well. And the last thing we want is yet more upheaval at a time when we've absolutely got to have a bit of stability.
What do you think?
I think she's keeping the seat warm for the next one.
How long then?
I would say probably after recess they will start
What do you
shuffling
think?
things about.
I think not all that long, because it's quite clear that Theresa May will not lead the Conservatives into another general election, and they will therefore have to have a new leader in place before one happens, and this is inherently a rather unstable situation we're now in.
Well, thank you both very much indeed.